Welcome to Zukkun Knows. Why did Russia invade Ukraine? This isn't just a modern war, it's the result of centuries of tension, shifting borders, collapsed empires, and political ambitions. In this video, we'll unpack the full story, from the fall of the Soviet Union to the invasion of Crimea and the 2022 full-scale war. Let's dive into one of the most important geopolitical conflicts of the 21st century. 1. The Soviet shadow. To understand why Russia invaded Ukraine, we need to go back more than a century, before the Soviet Union even existed. In the 19th century, there was the Russian Empire, a vast Tsarist monarchy stretching from Eastern Europe to the Pacific. Ukraine was part of this empire for centuries. Then in 1917, the Russian Revolution overthrew the Tsar, and a bloody civil war followed. From the ashes of that conflict, the Soviet Union was born in 1922. Led by the Communist Party, it was a federation of 15 republics, with Russia as the dominant force. Ukraine was the second largest republic and played a major role in Soviet industry, agriculture, and culture. But the Soviet system was authoritarian, and Ukrainians suffered heavily, especially during the Holodomor famine in the 1930s, which killed millions. Throughout the Cold War, the USSR stood as America's main rival. But economic stagnation, political unrest, and the disastrous war in Afghanistan weakened the system. When Gorbachev introduced reforms in the 1980s, perestroika and glasnost, it triggered unintended consequences. Nationalist movements grew, and in 1991, the USSR collapsed. Here's what's often forgotten. After the fall of the Soviet Union, Russia didn't disappear. It simply rebranded. The largest and most powerful republic of the USSR, Russia, became the Russian Federation, claiming continuity with both the Soviet legacy and the older Russian Empire. Many Russians, including President Vladimir Putin, never accepted Ukraine's full independence. To them, Ukraine was not a separate nation, but a lost piece of Russian history. First part of the empire, then the Soviet family. That belief still fuels Russia's actions today. 2. NATO's eastward expansion. To understand Russia's fears, we first need to understand NATO. NATO stands for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It was formed in 1949 during the early Cold War as a military alliance between the United States, Canada, and several Western European nations. Its core principle is collective defense. If one member is attacked, all others will defend them. NATO was created specifically to counter the threat of Soviet expansion in Europe. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, many believed NATO might fade away. But instead it grew. Former Soviet-controlled countries like Poland, Hungary, and the Baltic states were eager to join. Why? Because they feared Russia. These nations saw NATO as a guarantee of protection against future aggression. To Russia, this expansion felt like betrayal. Western leaders had allegedly hinted, though never officially promised, that NATO wouldn't move 1 inch eastward. But over the next decades, it did just that. By the 2000s, NATO was right on Russia's doorstep. Ukraine, while not a NATO member, expressed increasing interest in joining. For Russia, this was a red line. A pro-Western, NATO-aligned Ukraine would not only represent a loss of influence, but would also place Western military forces dangerously close to Russian territory. To the West, NATO is a defensive alliance. To Russia, it looks like a hostile encirclement. 3. Ukraine's 2014 revolution. In 2014, Ukraine's government faced a big decision. Should they become closer to Europe or stay friendly with Russia? The president at the time, Viktor Yanukovych, was very close to Russia. But many Ukrainians wanted to join the European Union, EU, instead. When Yanukovych suddenly said no to an EU deal, people got angry. Huge protests started in Kyiv, the capital city. These were called the Euromaidan protests. People filled the streets, waving EU flags and shouting for change. Things turned violent, and after months of unrest, the president ran away to Russia. A new government took over, one that wanted to work more with Europe. This made Russia very unhappy. 4. The annexation of Crimea. After the 2014 revolution in Ukraine, something huge happened. Russia took over a part of Ukraine called Crimea. Where is Crimea? It's a region in the south of Ukraine that sticks out into the Black Sea like a thumb on a hand. It's important because it has warm water ports and many people there speak Russian. Russia said it was protecting the Russian-speaking people there. But Ukraine and most countries around the world said, "You can't just take land from another country." This moment was a turning point. It was the first time since the Cold War that a European border was changed by force. 5. The Donbas conflict. After taking Crimea, Russia didn't stop. In eastern Ukraine, there's a region called Donbas. Some people there wanted to break away from Ukraine and be closer to Russia. Suddenly, armed groups declared independence. Fighting broke out between them and the Ukrainian army. This led to a war that lasted for years. Russia said, "We're not involved." But many signs showed that they were helping the rebels with weapons, fighters, and money. By the time 2022 came around, more than 13,000 people had died in this conflict alone. 6. Putin's vision of Russia. To understand why all this happened, we need to understand Vladimir Putin, Russia's leader. Putin believes that Ukraine is not really its own country. He sees it as part of Russia's history and identity. He once said that the collapse of the Soviet Union was the greatest tragedy of the 20th century. He dreams of bringing back Russian power, and that means having control or influence over countries like Ukraine. To him, a strong Ukraine moving toward the West feels like a threat, not just politically, but emotionally and culturally too. 7. Why the 2022 invasion? Happened on February 24, 2022, the world woke up to shocking news. Russia had launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. They sent tanks, planes, and soldiers across the border. Many thought Ukraine would fall in days, but Ukraine fought back hard. Cities like Kiev, Kharkiv, and Mariupol became battle zones. Ordinary people picked up weapons to defend their towns. President Volodymyr Zelensky became a symbol of resistance. What Russia thought would be a quick win turned into a long, bloody war that is still going on today. 8. Global reactions and sanctions. The world reacted quickly. Many countries said this is wrong and took action. They placed sanctions on Russia, rules that block trade, freeze bank accounts, and hurt the economy. Companies pulled out of Russia. Airplanes stopped flying there. Sports teams were banned from competitions. At the same time, countries sent help to Ukraine: money, food, weapons, and medical aid. NATO troops moved closer to the conflict just in case things got worse. It became more than just a local war. It became global news. 9. The human cost of war isn't just about politics or leaders. It's about people. Since 2022, thousands of civilians have died. Homes, schools, and hospitals have been destroyed. Millions of Ukrainians had to leave their homes, becoming refugees in other countries. Children grew up in bomb shelters. Families were torn apart. Some will never return to normal life. These are the true costs of war, things that no headline can fully show. 10. What lies ahead? Nobody knows how this war will end. Will Ukraine and Russia make peace? Will the fighting stop or go on for years? Some fear it could even spread to other countries. But one thing is clear: this war has changed the world. It changed how countries see each other. It changed how people think about freedom and safety. And the story is not over yet. Thanks for watching Zukkun Knows. This war is not just about borders. It's about history, identity, and the choices nations make. Even though it's far away for many of us, the impact is global. What happens in Ukraine affects fuel prices, food supply, and even internet safety around the world. In the end, war reminds us of what really matters: peace, truth, and the courage to stand up for what's right. Let's stay informed. Let's stay kind. And as always, stay curious. See you in the next video.